Oh, guys, good, you hear? I am so excited. Guess what? I hope this isn't about your podcast again. Why, did you finally listen to it?
Da-da-da-da. 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 The Groomer Next Door production. You're listening to BYOTP Radio. Coming up next, the Groomer Next Door. The Groomer Next Door podcast.
Dun, 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 dun.
Hello, pups and kittens, and welcome to another fun-filled episode of The Groomer Next Door. This is episode 186 with Lindsay Myers. She's with Primal Pet Food. One thing about this episode is we're going to continue the discussion on raw diet, but what really makes it a little bit more interesting is Lindsay's background. Normally I always like to do an origin story of just the company, but Lindsay has an origin story that expands all of our information and knowledge to really source her with accuracy when it comes to our dogs, even our cats. So that's going to be fun. I want to thank you guys. This week has been a lot of fun online, being able to talk to a lot of people, and a lot of you are overseas in Europe, and that has been really enjoyable. I want to make sure I'm able to do episodes that are going to be tailored to you as well. I want to make sure we cover raw diet, but I also want to see if there's a way of doing episodes with people over in Europe so that you too can actually have more information, because obviously this is a conversation podcast where we discuss this right here, and once that microphone turns off, that does not end our discussion, that only begins it. I want to be talking to you guys because you're living it as pet parents. And I want to make sure that I'm doing my best with the information I have to guide or to at least put you in contact with people that can help you. This week's Fact of the Week. At the end of World War I, the German government, trained the first guide dogs for war-blinded soldiers. Something I did not know. And I'll tell you, watching military working dogs, or MWDs, in action is just the greatest experience anybody can have. If there's ever a demo that is out where you have military doing some events where they're actually working with their military working dogs, I suggest it is the greatest thing to see these guys working and doing what they do. Same applies to your local police department. These dogs are just gorgeous, and they just amaze me all the time. Well, Lindsay Myers has stepped in, so with that said,
Oh, hello. Hold on a sec. Dad, we have a guest on the podcast.
this week we are so lucky to be joined by Lindsay Myers, and she is the territory manager, which sounds really cool, I like that, of Primal. Thank you so much for being on the podcast. I've been really wanting to talk to you guys.
I'm really looking forward to it. Thank you so much for having me.
It is a pleasure. Well, let's dive into the beginning. Now, this is going to be a two-parter. Normally, I ask what's just the origin story of the actual company, and in turn, it's going to be Primal. But let's do a two-parter. Let's start with your origin story, because you have a really cool story, and then we can hear about Primal.
Sure. So, I started my career in veterinary medicine. So, from the time I was younger than your daughter, I wanted to be a veterinarian. Basically, from when I first started talking, it's all I wanted to do, and I pursued it pretty intensely, pretty much my whole life. I started working in a veterinary hospital when I was 14, and mostly didn't stop. I bounced around when I went away to college and did a few different things. Ended up with an animal science degree in pre-veterinary medicine from the University of New Hampshire, go Wildcats, and was a vet tech. I was a certified vet tech, a licensed vet tech I practiced in Colorado and here in New Hampshire and a little bit in upstate New York, in all different parts of veterinary medicine, emergency critical care, exotics, general practice. And I loved my job. I was really passionate about it, and I always had a mind towards like nutrition, like whole foods nutrition for people and animals. It was always something that really interested me. In school, nutrition, I wrote a paper on feline nutrition way before I knew raw pet food really even existed as a commercial market. I wrote this paper in undergraduate school about feline nutrition and how important it was for carnivorous cats to have meat-based diets, and just was really fascinated by the pet food industry as a whole. And as I became more successful in the veterinary industry, I was always the weird one at the clinic that wasn't feeding the traditional vet clinic diet. I was always feeding the newest, coolest, holistic kibbles and canned toppers before canned toppers were cool. And it wasn't until my dog, Max, got sick, which I feel like is how every person who works or deals with the raw food industry story starts, is with their own dog getting sick. But he did. My little dog Max got really ill, and I couldn't fix him. The veterinarian I was working for, and I tried just about everything. We took him to specialists. We tried holistic treatment. We tried conventional medicine, and nothing was working, and Max was getting sicker and sicker and losing more and more weight. And I had a colleague from that tech school reach out to me and say, like, I know you think I'm crazy, but I think you should try this raw food thing. And I was a little concerned, to be honest, because in the veterinary industry, the concern with the raw food pet feeding is pathogens, is bacteria, right, or parasites. And Max, my dog who was sick, actually had really bad heart disease. And I knew that if I fed him, if I went to Whole Foods and picked up a bunch of raw chicken and started making my own raw food diet, which is all I thought was available at the time, that I could potentially get him really sick, right, with salmonella or something, because with a dog with heart disease, you do have to be more careful of those things. It's not like the average dog who maybe can deal with those pathogens better than like you or I could as an omnivore, right? So I was really nervous, and she made me do some research, and I found Primal. I found out that there was a pet food company that was making safe, as in pathogen-free, tested, negative for bad bacteria raw diets that were complete and balanced, and I was kind of blown away that I had never heard of it. So I tried it. I picked up a bag, and I started feeding it to Max. I was really bad, naughty vet tech, and started it kind of cold turkey without a slow transition. But he did really, really well. I remember the first couple of meals, him like actually feeling hungry and finishing the meal, which was sometimes difficult to get him to do. And his stool quality instantly improved. Mm-hmm. His eyes were, he was like that typical raw story that you hear. Like, it changed his life almost instantly. Within just a short couple of months, he was off of all of his medications, and it changed our lives together. Changed Max's life, but it really changed my life. I had this like aha moment where I dove into researching raw food, and I figured out that it could be done right, and I figured out why it wasn't just about the fact that it was raw, but also about the fact that it didn't contain carbohydrates like our processed kibble diets do. There were so many misconceptions for me about, even though I had been so passionate about the pet food industry, there were so many things I didn't know, like the content of carbohydrates in the average pet food, because it's not printed on the label, right? I'm sure you know that. Yeah. So I was really kind of mind blown, and the veterinarian that I worked for at the time was also mind blown, right? Because remember, she's been trying to treat Max, and she herself is somebody who's kind of into health food for herself, and was like, why didn't we think of this before? So once it fixed Max, we started recommending it to other clients' pets for similar GI issues, and it started fixing problems that we didn't know were GI related. And it sort of snowballed from there. So we started recommending Primal to our clients and customers quite a bit. The doctor I was working for at the time opened 2 more veterinary clinics that I helped her with. And we worked together for years, recommending and selling Primal. And then 2 years ago, I got the opportunity to work for Primal. So I was close with the area's territory rep, and she came in to visit me shortly before having her first child, and I was asking her who was taking over for her on maternity leave. And she was like, actually, we're hiring because I'm moving into a different position, and if you know anybody, let me know. And I went home and kind of mulled it over and was talking to my husband, and he's like, you are an idiot. If you don't go for that job, you are crazy. He's like, this is your dream job. Like, and I was like, no, it's not. How can I be in sales? I'm a vet tech. I've been doing this for so long. And at the time, I had been managing the practice for a few years. It was kind of like my baby. And I just couldn't stop thinking about it. And I made the leap, and I've never been happier. I tell people all the time, I fix so many more pets, and I'm so much more fulfilled than I ever did with medicine. I fix more of them with food than I ever did with meds. And I just love my job. I think it's so much fun to teach retailers and, the occasional veterinary staff, my unique perspective on whole foods nutrition and how it can really change your pet's life and how to make it easy for everyone. I think that's a big takeaway at Primal that we try is that we want it to be accessible for everybody. I don't want you to be priced out. I don't want you to not be able to feed it because you're worried about the pathogens because of an immune-compromised person in your house, or I don't want you to not do it because it's inconvenient. I want to make sure that everybody has access to whole, fresh food nutrition for their pet because I know how big of a difference it can make, even if it's a little bit. I think it's important to know that if you want to integrate raw, fresh whole foods into your pet's diet, you don't have to go all or nothing. It's like us. I always say that with us, when you make a New Year's resolution, it's not, I'm going to stop eating everything that I'm eating and only eat organic salads with grass-fed beef on top. It's like, I'm going to add more fresh vegetables and I'm going to eat less McDonald's or I'm going to eat less coffees. I think that you can do a little bit and it can go a really long way. So I try really hard to make that my mantra as I'm going around, which I think fits into Matt. So my boss, we should talk about Primal story. My boss, Matt, created Primal for his dog Luna after she was ill. So he lived in San Francisco at the time, and he was a chef. And his background was in food. And his dog Luna got sick with kidney failure, and the vets basically gave him no options. They were like, sorry, it's early renal disease. There's not a lot you can do for her. And so he sought out a holistic veterinarian who taught him about the BARF model diet, which I personally think is about the worst acronym on the planet, but stands for biologically appropriate raw feeding, for those who don't know, or bones and raw foods. He did some research on that diet and kind of married it with what he knew about whole foods and nutrition, and blended together a diet that's really similar to what we still make today, and started feeding it to Luna, and she improved dramatically. And then he got passionate about it, right? Like me, he started telling his family and friends and making it for them, and then quit his job and sold his first batch of it into a store in San Francisco in 2001. And here we are today. We sell one of the largest retailers of raw and freeze-dried pet foods in the United States, and we sell a lot of food in Canada as well, and a few other countries around the world. And Matt's really stayed true to his philosophies of really, really clean and ethical sourcing of all of the ingredients, but especially the meat, and making a whole, complete, and balanced all-life stages diet that's safe and effective, and that's complete and balanced without using any synthetics. So we don't even use the little vitamin packs that a lot of pet food companies use. We use all food to make a complete and balanced diet, which is a really challenging thing to do. So yeah, that's us and me.
I've never really done the two-parter when it comes to the origin story, but, before we started, you really had a really cool story. I'm like, you know what, there's no way not to actually put this down. And the other thing is, 2001, I'm thinking, a couple of years ago. Because, again, I'm one of those people that go, 2001 was just right, 3-4 years ago.
It feels like it was yesterday, doesn't it?
It does. Oh, my gosh. I'm like, this is ridiculous. And, and to think, we're talking 16 years, almost, by the end of the year, it'll be 17. I mean, wow, that is just crazy.
It's evolved in a big way. When I started feeding Primal, I don't know if you've seen how our foods look today in, like, the, independent pet retail store, but there are these beautifully merchandised bags and these glass freezers. When I started buying Primal, it was in these, like, kind of low-budget looking white zip-top baggies with, like, a sticker on the front of the bag. You had to get it from the basement of the really weird indie pet store. And when Matt originally started selling it, he sold it in little plastic Tupperware tub containers in San Francisco. So it's really incredible how much we've evolved and how much the industry has evolved in just a really short time. I mean, I know it seems like 2001 was yesterday, but and that 16 years maybe seems like a long time, but in the in the grand scheme of things, it's pretty quick that raw pet food has become, more and more prevalent. Even 5 years ago, if you mentioned that at a veterinary practice, you would have gotten, the third degree, I think. And so it's changed quite a bit, especially in the last 5 years, and I think mostly for the better, I hope.
I think it actually has changed a lot for the better. The other thing is I would say 2010. I'd even go back a little bit. That's probably maybe when the rumbling started. I mean, as weird as this may sound, raw has not been a part of discussion for that long. As you said, it would be in the basement of some weird indie pet store. And what's even worse is that where we are, there are no places like that anywhere in this town. So it's so bizarre to think, in the Midwest in general. I mean, there's a lot of open road, a lot of small towns, and they're, inhabited by maybe a Walmart or a small general store, or even down in the markets. I mean, if you go into a regular market here, it's not like you go into some other places where there's a Vons or a Rouse or whatever your big chain is. We don't have those even here, which shocks me. I'm like, wow. And of course, what's on the shelf? The regular big players, the ones that I've been advocating since starting this podcast of let's avoid. And that's I think that's the other part. That's a problem.
It's a challenge. And that's my, all of our jobs as, there's a few of us around the country as territory managers that try to find those tiny little pet stores and educate them as to why it's important to be carrying this. And if there isn't an independent pet store, we will sometimes reach out to the little independent, like, feed and grain stores. I have a lot of those in some of the more rural areas in New England where people, like you said, don't have access to an independent pet store, and so we'll find, like, the feed and grain stores or the little tiny, natural food grocers or somebody who can deliver the product to somebody in a because the problem with frozen food distribution is it's got to get to you at high quality, right? You can't, if I'm schlepping it from San Francisco, I've got to get it to you frozen. So it's a big challenge, and that's part of my job and that's why I love it so much, right? I have so many parts to my job. I can do most of my job is education at the retail and veterinary level, like educating staff members and retailers and their associates how to talk about raw food and why it's so important and how to sell it. But on the other hand, we have to do a lot of things like manage our distribution network and make sure the product is getting to the distributor and then to the pet store and then to the consumer's home safely. Because if we're talking about raw frozen pet food, we promise at Primal to start with a clean product and to make sure it's pathogen-free, but we have to teach you how to handle it as well. And I think that's a really important piece to raw feeding that sometimes isn't talked about enough, I think.
Agreed. And see, that's another reason why I really wanted to have you on, because, and we'll get into that in the, down the road, but it's that whole fear. Like you hear it. I was just looking at an article just yesterday. I forgot exactly. I wanted to say it was it wasn't the FCC, but there's just all of these different organizations. They're saying, oh, raw is bad. I mean, there's all these things wrong with it, and it's like, but why are we not looking at the actual big problem, the actual disgusting kibble, big players? That's the big problem here. Yes, any company could sell anything raw, and yes, we don't. There's a lot of different questions to it. And, I'm talking about the ones that have the little van back of a big box store. Here, you want to buy some raw meat for your dog or cat? Yes, there's a problem there. There's not a problem with a big company that's actually doing it right.
Well, it's true, right? You can do both things wrong, and you can do both things right. I think it has little to do with physically cooking something, right? And I think that's where we kind of misstep. Yeah. Is like, you can be an ethical company that sources your product appropriately. There are plenty of kibble companies that are doing the right thing, at least doing their best for what they are producing.
Right.
Do I believe that feeding your dog 30 to 50% carbohydrate is appropriate? No. I think we can do better than that. But I do think there are a lot of different ways to make a kibble, and a lot of them are superior, right? Like, I think I'm so thankful for things like the Pet Food documentary and Dr. Karen Becker's blog, and I know a lot of other really good bloggers who are out there trying to make the case for, like, hey, we should be paying attention, or Susan Thixton, right? Like, we should be paying attention. How do we not know what's going into this bag? How do we go to, our big box retailer or even to our grocery store and pick up this giant bag of pet food, the same one every few weeks? And not only do we not read the ingredients, but when we read the ingredients, we don't understand what they are, but we don't really question them. We also don't know how they get them, how they're processed into the bag. That's a lot. I mean, we wouldn't do that with our children, right? So why are we doing that with our pets? And if we are going to do that, we should be ready and willing to accept the consequences. If we eat a 100% processed food diet and we never pick up an apple or put lettuce on our burger, we're going to be ill. But the reality is 90-something% of consumers are doing that, right? Because it doesn't matter how much money you're spending on that high-quality, processed food. I'm not saying that it's all horrible and bad. My kids definitely have organic breakfast bars in the pantry downstairs, my human kids, right? Like, it's okay. Am I happier if you buy the organic breakfast bar versus the, General Mills store brand? Yeah, I think it's a better product for sure, but you should probably also eat an apple for breakfast, right? Like, there's also other things that you should be integrating that are not processed food, and I think that's where we haven't had that conversation yet, that integrating these whole foods into our pet diets is really, really important, and there's got to be a small place that you can start. You don't have to go big or go home.
Well, that's the great part about conversation, is that, you have this conversation probably more than I do, and I feel like I have this conversation a lot, but it's like, which leads me to my favorite question, and I told you about soapboxing and how I love to do it. I'm dying to hear, going into, let's just say you're in a big box store, whether it's a Walmart, Target, grocery store, wherever, or even pet store. Do you ever just, gosh, it just drives me nuts. You see somebody, they have name brand products filled to the top in their cart, and they pick up the bag, and it literally could be the worst one. And it usually is the worst product out there, and it's in their basket. And some way, somehow, do you ever find a way of starting a conversation with them about pet food and then soapbox like I do?
Sure, rarely. I will say rarely. I think it's tough. I feel like my entire life talking about pet food, and so sometimes when I find myself in that situation, I have to talk myself down. I'll probably off the soapbox, right? Like, it's okay. You saved a lot of them today. Take a deep breath. But sometimes I will find the in. I have found that a lot of times that backfires, right? Like, if you can't find the right approach, you might totally turn somebody off to be willing to accept that conversation. But if I have the in on that conversation, I absolutely will take the opportunity. Most of the time, it's with people that I'm closer with, right? Like friends, family. I have a funny example of that happening with a neighbor of mine when she admitted to feeding food that shall remain nameless, and I berated her over drinks at a neighbor's house. So yes, I will definitely find myself in those conversations. But I think it's more rare than people might think talking to me in a venue like this, right? Like, because I am really passionate about it, but I try really hard to be respectful and to make sure that when I'm having that conversation, it's the right timing and that person's going to be open to having that conversation. I had this conversation a lot when I worked in veterinary medicine because it was easy to, right? Because they're telling me about a problem that their pet's having, and I'm going through, as a veterinary technician, we ask those interview questions before the doctor comes in for the appointment, right? Why are you here? Mm-hmm. How long has it been happening? What are you feeding your pet? How many times a day? How much? And so, as we would go through that, I would say, well, what else? Are you feeding any fresh food? Well, you mean table scraps?
well,
let's
terrible.
Let's divvy that up. Table scraps for me, are you feeding salmon skin or are you feeding bagels? Because bagels, no, let's let that lie. I don't think shoe dogs are colored a bit. But if you're feeding them salmon skins or the leftover vegetables, yeah, I think that's great. And they'd be like, really? And that would sometimes be a really easy. That's the way I like to start the conversation, is in a really natural way that helps them to come to the conclusion for themselves so that they feel ownership of it. I think that's the only way to make this come across for people, right? Because nobody wants to feel accused like I did to my poor friend over drinks at the neighbors the other day. But it is tough being somebody like you or I that's passionate about this and just wants to make everybody understand how big of a difference you can make with just a small amount of real food. So
it's funny. No, I loved your answer because I think this is therapy for me. Because every time I ask somebody this question, it just, in a sense, makes me feel either like I'm doing the right thing or that I'm just an absolute crazy person, just randomly going up to somebody.
Maybe both.
I'm going to go lean towards the crazy person. Because, again, here's a guy who is not a small guy. I'm 6'7", and so I'm not a small guy. And again, another thing that really is kind of a sad stereotype, but I'm a guy who actually is passionate about cats and dogs. A very rare thing, they're really fine. And here I'm just like, that's, I get it. Sometimes you'll see, and I've had this conversation with other people where they're like, well, maybe they can't afford, the better stuff. That I completely will take into, context and I'll think about it. But the thing is if I see nothing but name brand, and I'm talking 3 or 4, and I hate to say this, but I've seen 3 or 4 24 packs of name brand soda, bags of chips. Obviously, probably the right fit, I guess, in that basket, but...
Well, that's the problem, right, is that's the consumer that's actually the hardest to talk to about it. Because if I say to them, isn't it better to buy the organic breakfast bar, and they look at me like I have 6 heads, then I'm not going to be able to have that conversation.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And that's what I mean by coming to that conversation naturally, because if you kind of let them have ownership of it, it's a little different. You might be able to get to it in a different way. I really get into it mostly with the moisture conversation. I don't know if you're passionate about cats. I'm sure you probably have this conversation a lot, but I really a lot of times get people to start feeding their pets better by having them add something free, which is water, because your carnivore, whether it's a dog or a cat, is intended to eat its moisture, not drink it. They're a horrible drinker. I don't care how good of a drinker Fifi or Milo is. He is a good drinker because he has to be, because you are feeding him something. If you ate a bowl of dry cereal first thing in the morning with no milk on it, all the way to the bottom, you would have to chug some OJ, right? And dogs and cats cannot suck or chug water. They have to splash it into their mouth with the back of their tongue. It's incredibly inefficient. And if that's how you had to drink your OJ after eating that bowl of cereal, you would absolutely be dehydrated. So sometimes I start this hey, this dry processed food you're feeding your pet is only for your convenience and has nothing to do with your pet's nutrition. Sometimes I start that conversation with something 100% free, which is water. And then I move it up, right? Then I'm like, okay, now if we're going to get serious, how about we add the other things that a dry kibble-based diet is missing, like fats and probiotics and enzymes. Primal has this really awesome product. I don't know how much you researched before you called me today, but we have this really cool product, raw goat milk.
I wanted to go into that. It's actually 2 down, and I'm dying to ask about it.
Oh, good. I'm going to put it on hold then, because it is my favorite product of ours to sell and my dog's favorite product. And I think a huge game changer in the lower budget consumer or the gateway consumer that hasn't yet been able to try raw feeding, whether it's for cost or convenience or whatever. So I'll put it on hold. I'm going to zip my lip and wait for the question.
Well, I'll tell you, I didn't go over all the questions with you. I have almost all of the product down, and I always have to make sure I add everything in. So we will begin that. Now, I want to actually go with this because it kind of centers around Primal and everything. And the main question, which, again, here we go, where the main objective has been, and I remember the article was from the CDC. They made a comment about raw. And I read it yesterday. I don't know if that article is brand new, but, they had their naysaying about it. And, again, it's one of those, yes, if you buy it from a back of a van, behind a Walmart, then yes, you're going to get garbage. Always, check the place that you're actually buying your food from. It makes sense. So I remembered that. And it brings me to my question is, and this is one of the questions you get all the time, why serve our pets raw food?
So there's a lot of answers to that question. And for me, it's multifaceted. The first thing is that dogs and cats are carnivores. They're different from one another. We should certainly separate them. Cats are not small dogs. They're obligate carnivores. They have some differences in their digestion on they're a different level of carnivore, right? They're obligate carnivores. I think of that like obligated to eat meat to survive, right? So let's put them in a little hole over here. Dogs are still carnivores, but they're opportunistic carnivores, right? They're a different type of carnivore, mostly because they're really bad at hunting. So they can't catch something every day like a cat can, right? So they have opportunities of fasting. They're intended to fast, right? Their bodies evolved over thousands of years to have long periods of time where they didn't have regular access to food. And when they didn't have that raw meat meal to eat, they would chew on the bones of the old carcass. They'd sometimes eat other dead prey animals that were out in the wild. But they'd also chew on, like, plants and berries and sticks and whatever they could get their hands on, right? But let me ask you this, though. Were they, like, roasting potatoes over the fire, or, like, taking out their rice cooker, or, like, stewing oats over the fire? No. So even though I think that's a big distinction that sometimes, especially the veterinary community, actually likes to push back on, is like, well, dogs are not obligate carnivores. Dogs can utilize other things for fuel. And I'm like, sure, they need more fiber. They certainly can utilize different things for energy and to keep them full, but they're not eating starchy carbohydrates. And there's a huge difference between fibrous vegetables and a little bit of fruit and starchy carbohydrates. First of all, you have to cook carbohydrates to make them available for use to digest, right? Like as an omnivore, you and I are omnivores, most of us are omnivores, and when we eat something starchy like rice or wheat or even potatoes, we have to process them with either cooking or fermenting or whatever in order to make them available for us to eat. And dogs never had access to doing that. We've only been feeding them starchy carbohydrates for a very short time, less than 100 years. So anybody telling me that they've evolved to eat that thing is just misinformed, right? So can they eat things other than meat? Sure. But are they eating starchy carbohydrates? No. Raw food, meaning, so the fact that we don't cook our meat and veggie, fruit, dog food when we could cook it is that cooking does destroy some of the more delicate vitamins, as well as all of the enzymes in food, and all of the bacteria, right? And bacteria blueberry gets a bad rap sometimes. It's getting in a better light recently. But good bacteria is good for you. Bacteria is good for you. You couldn't live without your biome, right? The bacteria in your gut and on your skin helps keep you healthy and protects your immune system. It's incredibly important. And dogs, because they're carnivores, and cats, I don't want to leave them out, have very short digestive tracts that are intended to process raw food that is still containing the enzymes within it. You know, every raw food item contains the enzyme within it that destroys itself. And what I mean by that is if you take like a raw blueberry and you put it on your counter for 3 weeks, it starts to disintegrate, right? That's because blueberry cells contain enzymes that destroy blueberry cells. Same with every other raw food. If you cook that food, if you turn it into jam, it preserves it, right? Mm-hmm. If you cook meat, it preserves it. If you cook things, it kills the enzymes and stops that breakdown from happening. But dogs and cats are not their bodies were not created to make that many digestive enzymes because they don't have these long intestinal tracts like we have to ferment things and break them down. They have really short time. Their nose to tail time is supposed to be very, very short. And it's, you know, they eat that raw food and then it comes out the other end very quickly. And if they have that short amount of time and not enough resources to make the enzymes to digest it, their foods should be raw and containing the enzymes within themselves to digest themselves so that they can help to pull the nutrients out of it, right? Mm-hmm. And they also should have the bacteria, the good, healthy bacteria. Should they be loaded with pathogens from the feedlot? No. That's a completely different story, right? The amount of bad, really virulent pathogenic strains of bad bacteria that are on down feedlot meat is totally inappropriate. If you pump your cows full of antibiotics day in and day out and then you sell them for slaughter and the slaughterhouse isn't using the proper cleanliness standards, then that meat's going to be contaminated and you could get really sick. And guess what? So could your dog. I get a lot of pushback on that one because some of my colleagues are really passionate that, look, dogs are dogs, they're not us. They lick the sidewalk, they eat dead fish out of the lake, they lick their rear ends, they are better equipped to handle bad bacteria than we are, and they're right. They are better equipped to handle it than we are, but I've seen a lot of dogs get sick from bad stuff, right? I worked in vet med for a long time. If they're exposed to really bad pathogens and they have a debilitated GI tract from eating 4 years worth of 40% carbohydrate kibble from the grocery store, they're going to get sick if they eat contaminated meat, right? Mm-hmm. Just like you are. They might not die from salmonellosis like you would, but they get really sick, right? And they can die from it. They can die from it. So I think it's important that we have this conversation about why raw food is important, but I also think it's important that we have the conversation about how to make raw food safe for the consumer that's handling it and for the pet that's eating it. Because we can do it. Primal's been doing it for quite a long time, right? We can make these foods safe. It's a challenge to do so, and it definitely costs a bit more money and resources, and we have to be more careful about where we're sourcing that product from. But if we can do it right, we should do it right. And I think the only way to change the conversation with the CDC and the FDA and the AVMA, which is the American Veterinary Medical Association, the only way to change that conversation with them is by teaching them that we can do it right. It's not by saying, hey, well, bacteria is good for dogs and they should have it. It's by saying, hey, what if we did this that actually does improve pet quality of life, but we did this in a really safe and effective way where we could prove to you that we can make this food in a way that's not going to harm your clients or their pets, then, you know, let's do this, right? Like, you know, we know, we're all professionals who we all understand that fresh food is important for us, and we should understand that fresh food is important for our dogs. And when we're talking about fresh food for a carnivore, we have to be talking about raw foods because of all the reasons I just said. Enzymes, probiotics, and moisture. I guess I didn't throw that one back in there, but moisture is important too. When you cook something, you get rid of the moisture. And, you know, like I said, dogs should be eating. I pulled up that CDC page that you were talking about because I've read it about 150 times. And I pulled it up while I was just talking to you, and the picture that's next to that pet food safety article is a dog with his face down in a big bowl of dry kibble. It just makes me so sad. So I think we need to change the conversation, and I think we can as long as we approach it from, it's kind of like this soapbox thing, right? If I run to the FDA or the CDC and I say, hey, you jerk, dogs are carnivores, they should be eating bacteria, they can lick the sidewalk and eat dead fish out of lakes, then they're not going to listen to me, right? if I approach it from a way that they can understand or a way that says, hey, I'm listening to you too. How do you want me to make this better? How can I make you confident that this food is safe? And Matt, my boss, has been doing that well for a long time. He's really passionate about safety, and we do quite a few things to ensure the safety of our products, and I'm super proud of it. So.
I can honestly say I'm proud. My friends all lick the sidewalk and smell each other's butts, so I'm happy with it, you know. It's totally fine with me. My dogs, I love them, and even the ones that aren't mine, hey, you can lick the window. My Akita licks the window as I'm walking in the door. Hey, you know.
My dogs are disgusting. They're the
disgusting,
worst.
but you know what? I love them. And
I love them anyways.
For that reason, it's totally fine. I you know, it processed. I couldn't remember who had, you know, made the quote, and that's why I was like, CDC was the one. And yeah. I think that a lot of this, and this is my perspective on it, and just my opinion. I think a lot of the CDC and a lot of the different organizations out there are a little bit swayed. I think that they're being told one thing by the big pet food companies. I mean, you know, I mentioned PFI, and I've been open about. I was open on our Facebook page about them canceling, and that's just the simple fact that these guys are all swayed by the big pet food companies, and you know, when you have those big names sitting on your board, how can you be able to look at it with clear eyes and clear conscience? I mean, that just doesn't make sense. They're making the rules, so the ones making the rules are following the rules. I mean, that's just a load of BS to me. And
yeah,
I think
you know, it's really tough. I have this conversation a lot because when people find out that I'm from both industries, they really want to pry about it. And a lot of them really bring it back to even the little local level. Like, a lot of them get angry with their local veterinarian. You know, like, well, I told my veterinarian once that I was feeding, you know, your raw food, and he freaked out, so now I just lie to him when I go and tell him something else that I'm feeding. You know, and I get sad about it, and they're like, well, he just wants to sell me his prescription diet because he wants to pocket the money, and he knows it's going to kill my pet. And I'm like, look, no veterinarian goes to school to make money. And if they did, that was a really bad decision because they're not going to, right? So they go into veterinary medicine because they're passionate about animal health and they want to make your pet better. The reason they're recommending those foods, those prescription diet foods or those veterinary approved brands, is because those are the only reps walking into veterinary clinics. Mm-hmm. I worked there, like I said, for 20 years. The only reps that I ever saw from food companies were Royal Canin, Purina, and Hill Science Diet. Yeah. That's it. Those were the three that walked in.
Great trifecta.
And those are the only ones they're the only ones educating that community. That's your Blue Buffalo jumped on the bandwagon a couple of years ago.
That. Yeah.
But you know, that's the only education they're getting. That's it. You know, I look at my retailers who are asking me those questions, and I say, you have me here. I'm here educating you about this today. And what company did you have here educating you last week? You know, you're getting this huge broad-based knowledge from all these different companies who are teaching you about food safety and health, and your veterinary clinic is not getting that. It's just like your human doctor. How much does your human doctor know about nutrition?
Right.
Right? Like, they're just not trained in that. And I think that if we open these conversations up broader, we can all be the ones to influence things like the CDC and the FDA, but not if we come from it from that very combative front. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, I think it's important to do what you and I do and pick our soapbox, right?
Yeah.
Like, if we pick the audience and pick the way to approach it, I think we can make a difference. And I think it's getting there. You know, it is changing bit by bit over time, but I think it's going to take a lot of talking about it, like we're doing today, to get them to listen. But I think we're going to make it happen. I know it.
I know it's going to make headway. It's just time. I mean, Dr. Royal, when she was on, she was telling us that the textbooks were written by a big pet food company, which
yeah, they are
completely just smacked me upside the head. Like, well, wait a second here. Again, here we go back to the ones making the rules. Well, if you're teaching the future doctors, you know, or veterinarians, then what chances do we have? And you know, I know that the couple vets that I know, they kind of, you know, cringe a little bit because I do talk about this stuff, and you know, it's a little frightening, you know, because they don't want to get lumped in. Oh gosh, you know, Purina just came out with a veterinary blend. I've got to be careful. And, of course, I've said it so many times, I would be willing to talk to Purina. But it would not be, it would be a straightforward, here's my questions, and they're not going to be softballs. I will throw the same questions at you that everybody should be asking. Difference is, even at that, they'll never talk. And I find that to be disturbing. So, but now I wanted to hear about this, and you started to talk about it, and I'm dying to hear about this, and because I've got the products in front of me, I've written everything down as much as I could, but the goat milk, the raw goat milk, I was like, okay.
It's weird, right?
You know what? You have a lot of different things on the website, and that was the first thing I was just like, okay, that's the first thing I'm going to talk about, because what?
Why? I know I get a lot of why. So, first of all, it's on our supplement line, right? It's not. It's separate from our foods. We consider it a supplement. We were approached by Matt was approached, my boss was approached by a really good customer of his about goat milk, and he was like, "What? Like, why?" Right? He had the same question you and I did. Like, I don't get it. And so this customer of his, who's really passionate about whole foods, started talking to him about the benefits of raw goat milk and how big of a difference it can make, and how these farmers used to do it with their weaning puppies and blah blah blah, and how it can help with all these health ailments, and how it can, infuse all these vitamins and probiotics and enzymes into whatever you're feeding, and can really help to make dead foods live. And he was like, "Well, that sounds pretty cool. Like, let me look into this." Now, of course, when you're feeding a milk product, if you pasteurize it, so if you cook it to make it safe, like all of our conventional milks are, you destroy all those things that we just talked about: enzymes, probiotics, and sensitive vitamins and fats, right? So we knew that if we were going to make a goat milk product, it was going to be a raw goat milk product. And I don't know if you've ever looked into raw milk sales in the United States, but it is a huge controversial topic that we could do an entire separate podcast about. The pasteurizing and the dairy industry in the United States is extremely regulated, and is difficult to sell raw milk. There are some states where it's illegal to sell raw milk. There's a lot of states where it's illegal to sell raw milk for human consumption. And so Matt started looking into it, tried to find himself a good farm. He's really passionate about finding really good farms and ranches to procure our products from. And because this was dairy, which to him is similar to meat as far as how he wants the animals treated and fed, he needed to find a good place. So he found a really great goat farm that he could feel good about that was close by to him in Central California. And started to do his research on how he was going to mass market this. Well, it was going to have to be frozen in order to keep the milk fresh. And he found out somewhere in the process that he was going to have to color the milk. This is so bizarre, but in some states, if you're selling raw, as in unpasteurized milk, it has to be a different color. It can't be white, because that's what deems it not fit for human consumption. Is the color difference. And so he was like, forget it, I'm not adding something. He's really passionate about every single ingredient in Primal Pet Foods has a nutritional purpose. There's nothing that's added as a filler or, a colorant or a texturizer or anything like that. And so he was like, I'm not doing it, I'm not adding. And then somebody, I don't know if he came up with it or somebody mentioned turmeric, but he decided he was going to add turmeric to the milk to make it yellow. And so he's like, let's make it a supplement. So we add turmeric, cinnamon, ginger, and a probiotic blend to the milk. It's bottled sterilely at the milking facility, and then we take multiple samplings of each batch or vat and send it to our testing facility. We have a third-party lab that tests all of our products to make sure they're negative for Salmonella, E. coli, and Listeria before they're sent to market. And so because our milk is also raw, we send that out for testing as well. And so all the supplements are added, and the testing samples are taken, and then it's bottled there in the facility and flash frozen, and then we distribute it from our facility in Fairfield, California, all over the country in pints and quarts. It comes in the freezer section, and you do have to thaw it when you get home. Once it's thawed, it is good for about 10 days before it starts to sour. If you've ever had experience with raw milk, it's a bit different than pasteurized milk in that when it starts to sour, it doesn't have that real rancid boiling smell. It smells more like cultured, like yogurt or cheese. So I actually personally feed it to I don't even pay attention to when I thaw it, and I feed it to my dogs till it's gone because the sour the better for them. But what I tell most of my consumers to do if they're going through the bottle really slow is that on the first day that they thaw it, when it's like nice and slushy, to shake it up really good to make sure all the parts, because it's going to be separated. If you've ever had raw milk, it like the fat's on the top, and then there's the liquid, and then of course all our supplements we add will be on the bottom. So you shake it really good, and then you can pour it in an ice cube tray and refreeze it, and then you can crack those cubes like into a Ziploc or something in the freezer or a big jar or bucket, and you can thaw individual cubes in the fridge, and then they always stay fresh. That's the way to do it if you're feeding a cat. Cats eat sour stuff because they have taste buds for sour. So if you're giving it to a cat, or if you want it to stay fresh for a really long time, or if you're feeding it really sparingly, freeze it into ice cubes. I call it my Band-Aid product. It literally fixes everything. It's great for diarrhea, upset stomach, food transitions, any kind of inflammation because of the turmeric in it. Works really well for, dogs who have mobility or joint issues. I always say it has Primal goat milk has everything kibble is missing: moisture, probiotics, and enzymes. I found that it's an incredible tool for skin issues in dogs because it also has everything that's usually missing that's helping to make their skin barrier thick, right? So your skin is made up of fat and water. You have this little lipid bilayer that protects your body from outside harms, right? And your skin is made up of this little fat and moisture bilayer. And if you're eating a dry, kibble dog food, that's devoid of moisture and fat, right? So if you're eating something like dry kibble, but you put a little bit of Primal goat milk on top of it, you've suddenly got moisture, fat, probiotics, and enzymes to help you digest the carbohydrates in your food and moisten that food so that you can better digest it if your dog and are really bad at drinking. And you've also got the turmeric, cinnamon, and ginger to settle the stomach. And really, once you fix gut health, your skin health improves dramatically. And so if we can use that probiotic turmeric, healthy, moisturized, wonderful chain fat to heal their gut a bit, then their skin health gets better kind of automatically, which is why I think it's that perfect Band-Aid product. Literally, it doesn't matter what's wrong with your dog. You're going to love goat milk. It's inexpensive, and it's easy, right? That customer that's like really intimidated by feeding a raw food diet can totally understand putting a little splash of milk over their dog's kibble. And usually then you can also have the conversation of like, okay, put a little splash of the goat milk, but also add some warm water to make sure that kibble is appropriately hydrated for your dog because, that dry food is convenience for you, but your dog should be eating its moisture. I find that once people start, we call it our gateway drug, like a gateway drug, like our Primal gateway drug. So once you start eating that goat milk and you realize that it's not that bad to thaw something and that you see those huge health benefits from it, you're so much more willing to do something like a freeze-dried or a frozen topper or, a couple of raw meals a week. Or once you see your dog or your cat feeling better, there's nothing that's going to stop you from continuing to, experiment with that.
That is completely
food
interesting.
type.
I looked at it and I went, no, this is so weird and cool at the same time. And yes, I mean, it has its own drop down. I mean, it is right there. And it was just, I looked at it and went, oh, this has got to be something I have to ask. Now,
I have to tell you, we haven't been selling it for that long, and it's in our top 5 SKUs all across the country. Like, it has become an incredibly popular product. It's really kind of cool. I'm super excited about it.
Well, it's something that I have, I've yet to actually come across anything like it so far, and I've been doing this for quite a while, so I was like, oh, wow, okay, here, now we're in a whole different area where I've not heard of this, being, kind of gone down this road, and I like it. I'm like, all right. And another thing that really intrigues me is, a lot of times you'll hear people say, well, it's all or nothing. And I mean, I hear it not entirely here, but out, within the outer areas before I'm actually recording with people, or even talking to other people in the industry. And a lot of times you'll hear it's all or it's nothing. And I just think that's kind of a bad way. I mean, you've mentioned something that really has triggered in my head is, you're like, look, kibble. If you're going to have the kibble, I mean, you're not slapping anybody down saying, which in this industry, you've heard it, there are people, and again, luckily not on this podcast, but I've heard it, where it's, if you're going to feed the kibble, then you know what, there's just nothing you can do. You're almost a lost cause. And I'm like, no, it's not a lost cause. I mean, there's options here. And I've heard it so many times. You're like, well, you know what? If you're going to do the kibble, there's a cheap way of doing it. Put water. There's the goat, raw goat milk, And I'm thinking, that's kind of a cool way, because you're speaking for Primal, but you're also understanding that not everybody is going to go raw. And that's a subtle thing that I really needed to point out for everybody, because I don't know if everybody caught that, but I wanted to point it out, because I thought it was a cool way of actually saying, hey, look, we understand there are ways for you to actually work with things. So I wanted to give you credit on that one.
Well, thank you. I think it would be a myth to say, I usually start when I'm going in and I'm educating like a retail store or something, I start with like talking about my pets. And for years when I worked in vet med and my dog Max, who I talked about at the beginning of the show, was really sick, I was a vet tech. I was not making very much money, and I had 3 dogs. And lucky for me, Max weighed 8 pounds. So it was very affordable for me to feed him a 100% Primal diet to fix his health issues. But when I saw it fix Max, I couldn't not feed it to my other 2 dogs, but they were larger, and I was broke. So there was I would have been devastated if somebody said that to me. If somebody was like, well, why bother? You're killing your dog with that kibble. I mean, I was doing the best that I could to feed my dogs the best thing that I possibly could, and I bought the best kibble that I could afford, and I always hydrated it, and I always bought the best, for a long time I bought canned toppers, like the little meat-only canned toppers to put on their food, because I knew how important it was to give them more meat and less carbohydrates, but I simply couldn't afford to do it any other way. And so, once I learned about raw, of course, I would top with raw instead. I think a lot of that conversation comes from 2 areas, right? The first area is it better? So it would be a myth for me to tell you that I don't feed any kibble now, and I have not fed kibble for years. Before I started working for Primal, I switched my dogs to 100% raw food. I was able to do it financially at the time. I also had only 2 dogs, and they were really small. And I had a dog with some allergy issues, and I knew that there was no way I was going to get him better without switching him 100%. He was a train wreck. He was a rescue from the South who had a completely messed up GI tract and skin. And there are some dogs who, no matter what you do and what you add, if you don't get them on a raw food diet, they're not going to get better. That's certainly, to defend those crazy raw zealots that you're talking about, there are some things that just are not going to, like my Max, that are just not going to get better unless you just go big, right? But for the average consumer, I mean, for most of the people we're talking about, even ones who have pets with health problems, a little bit goes a really long way. And I think it's important that we in the industry, whether we're a retail employee, a veterinary worker, a podcast person like you, a salesperson like myself, or just your average consumer, that we're careful that, like, we don't talk people in or out of something for the wrong reasons, right? Like, let them dictate it. If cost is their concern, figure out a way to make it affordable for them to integrate raw food. I think that there's a lot of different ways to do this, and there's no wrong way to start feeding. Well, that's not true. There is a wrong way. So what I will say is that a lot of the reason that people say that you can't mix is safety. And we should talk about that for a second, because I think that I don't want anybody to get the impression that they can go to the grocery store and buy raw chicken and mix it with their pet kibble, because I do think that that's a very dangerous thing to do. Would I give my dogs a piece of raw chicken from the grocery store? You know what? I probably would. I don't, because why would I? They get a Primal diet that's completely balanced, and I don't have to. I do give them raw chicken eggs from my own. I have chickens that I own in my backyard, and I'm sure there's bad bacteria on that, and I'm not worried about it. But you know what? My dogs are fed a raw food diet, and so they have a very acidic stomach, and their nose-to-tail digestion is incredibly quick, meaning when they eat their food, it passes out the other end very quickly, because they don't eat any processed food, they don't eat any carbohydrates. If your dog is eating a 40% carbohydrate meal every day, which is what the average kibble is, I mean, no matter what brand you buy, I don't care if it's grain-free or grain with, it's carbs are carbs are carbs, right? So if it's a carbohydrate-based food and you're feeding that every single day, their stomach is not going to be as acidic as a wolves or a raw-fed dogs or whatever, because eating carbohydrates downregulates that acid production, right? That's a long story for another day. But their protection against bad bacteria is compromised when you feed them something that is... The other thing is that kibble meal is nutrient-dense, right? They add a ton of vitamins and minerals to the top of that after they've done cooking it to make it complete and balanced. So if you chop up some raw chicken from the grocery store that's loaded with salmonella, and you mix it up with that kibble dog food that probably has some other bad bacteria from the rendering plant on it, and then you add some warm water to it, that is the perfect storm for making your dog really sick, right? So I think that maybe is part of the reason that some of the raw food feeders have been like, no, you can't be doing that, right? Like, some of it is that they understand that dogs shouldn't be eating carbohydrates. Some of it is that they think it's going to make your dog sick if you mix raw with kibble. If you pick a pathogen-free, safe, well-sourced raw food, whether it's freeze-dried or frozen or goat milk or whatever, and you mix that with your dog's kibble, as long as it's a safe, pathogen-free product, it's only going to improve the digestion of that kibble, right? It's only going to add moisture, probiotics, enzymes, meat, less carbohydrates. So as long as it's safe, it's okay to mix. So you're right, you don't have to go big or go home. Like, start small. I tell people all the time at my trainings that I don't care if it's an 8-pound Chihuahua or a 70-pound Labrador, tell them to start with one nugget a day. Like, when I'm talking to my stores that only have access to, a lot of stores, pet retail stores, don't have access to freezer, right? And so they have just our freeze-dried formulas, which are still raw. We take them when they're frozen and get the water out using a freeze-drying process, which is a bit expensive to do, which is why they're a little more expensive per nugget than the frozen is. But you can take one of those nuggets and add it to a kibble meal with some warm water to make it like a gravy. And I don't care. Like I said, 8-pound Chihuahua, 60-pound Lab, it's going to be the same cost to do that, right? Because I don't care what size it is, start with one nugget. And it's that same mantra I've been saying this whole time. A little bit goes a long way. You don't have to go big or go home. Start with a small amount of whole raw foods and kind of, go from there. Let them decide what the next step is. And that really helps these industry professionals to start recommending raw foods and not be afraid of the cost conversation, because the cost conversation is a big one, right? Like, if you're a rescue person or a vet tech like myself with 3 dogs, or you have a huge Great Dane, you're terrified when somebody tells you should be feeding a raw food diet, because that can be really expensive. And, I get that. And so I think it's important that we always keep in mind people's budgets and lifestyles, and, everybody's an individual. And as long as you're educating them from the right perspective, then let them make that choice. I'm not here to vilify any. I always say buy the best pantry staple you can afford. I hate saying the K word, kibble, but I'm like, buy the best pantry staple you can afford and add as much fresh raw to it as you possibly can. And you'll be successful. You'll have healthier pets for that, no doubt about it. Oh, and my plug for cats: it is cheaper to feed your cat Primal than it is to feed premium canned food. So just check it out. Look at the back of the bag. It's not that expensive. You can do it. It's not scary. I promise.
You know what's great is that I finally have met somebody who is on her soapbox as much as I might be, which is awesome. I'm not so nuts. I feel so much better now. Well, I gotta make sure I mention a lot of different things on product wise. We have about 15 minutes. So I want to make sure I go through this. Now, in different lines now, I went down, you have the complete formula for both dogs and cats, which you have the starter pack, the raw frozen formula, the raw pronto formulas, freeze-dried formulas. Specifically, explain what they are for people who are completely new to the Primal.
So any of our complete formulas so we have dog diets are different from cat diets.
Right.
But we have a full line of complete and balanced formulas. So if it says formula, it doesn't matter which format it's in, it's the same exact food. What I mean by that is take our dog formula. Let's pick chicken for an example. So we have freeze-dried chicken nuggets. We have frozen chicken nuggets. We have frozen chicken patties, and we have frozen chicken pronto. All that is different shapes. It's the exact same food. So we blend up a complete and balanced diet using only whole foods, right? So we start with a base of meat. Our chicken is only chicken. So we start with chicken. It's got muscle meat, bones, organ meat. We grind that up. We add whole food supplements to it. Depending on which protein it is will depend on the supplements that are added in order to make it complete and balanced. So we add fruits, vegetables, oils, some really bizarre things like montemorillonite clay, which is a clay that's mined from the earth that gives us some of the trace minerals that is needed in food without using a synthetic, things like manganese and zinc and selenium. So we mix all those things together, and then we press them into shapes. So the nuggets are like little tiny 1-ounce bricks. The patties look like square hamburger patties separated by like wax paper. And the pronto looks like kibble, these tiny little circular pieces. But they're all from the same formula. And then to make our freeze-dried of that formula, we take the nuggets, the frozen nugget shape that look like a tiny little 1-ounce brick, and we put those through the freeze-drying process. So if you buy a bag of freeze-dried chicken canine formula from Primal and a 3-pound bag of frozen chicken nugget formula from the freezer, that's the exact same product with the exception of the moisture. So the water is taken out of the product during the freeze-drying process without cooking it. So that's how we make our food. So if you're looking at the turkey sardine blend, it's going to be the same across all those different formulations, just in different shapes, sizes, and moisture. And then it's the same for the cat. So for the cats, we don't have the patties. We just have the nuggets, the pronto, and the freeze-dried. And then we have a few other products. We have a treat line that our customers asked us to do a treat line using our really well-sourced meat. So we did that many years ago. Our customers love that. They're all single-source meat. So like if you buy the pork, it's only going to have pork in it for those allergy friends. They're all meat-based. And then we have our mixes and grinds, which are a little more challenging. That's kind of the original game. They're not complete and balanced diets. They're either meat and bone only, and they come in these little, they look like giant sausages, giant sausage rolls. They're called mixes and grinds. Mm-hmm. The grinds are just meat, bone, and organs, and the mixes are meat, bone, and organ with a little bit of organic vegetables in them. Those a lot of people use as topper. It's an inexpensive but less convenient option. But those are not complete and balanced. If you look on the back of any of our bags, it'll tell you on the label whether it's a Chubb like mix and grind product or a bag, it'll tell you if it's complete and balanced or not. Anything that the formula is complete and balanced, anything that doesn't say complete is not.
Right. No, the frozen mixes are not. That's why I was like, okay, well, you got. Now you have a great deal on. Like I was really shocked. Your treats. I mean, there was just a great deal. I was going to write them all down, and I was like, no, that's a lot of writing there, because you have a lot of single source. I was like, wow, because a lot of people are concerned. They want to make sure it almost in a one-stop shop. One thing I've learned from doing this is that people do, in a sense, marry a product, which I know people like Taz Latifi would say, no, you want to, mix up your proteins. And that's one thing that you guys do is that you mix things up. So that's helpful. Some people are very, much in love with one product. I'm going to go to Primal. I'm going to pretty much marry it, and I will change my single source each time, but I want to keep it. And you've done that. You've done it when it comes to...
Yeah, and we like to cater to both of those things, right? Like for myself, I buy a rainbow. Like I just did my order, my employee order for my dog. I'm picking it up on Friday, and it's literally I didn't even buy 2 bags of the same thing. It's a rainbow of different colors and proteins for them. But on the other hand, Matt is very, very, very careful about making sure it's complete and balanced, so that if you are that customer who only wants to feed chicken because of the price, or if you're the customer that's dog is allergic to everything and can only tolerate the duck or the pork,
Right.
then you can buy that and stick with that, and it'll still be complete and balanced without using a vitamin pack. I think that's something that people think is really special. There's not a lot of companies doing that. It's a real challenge for us to make it complete and balanced without a vitamin pack, and I'm pretty proud that we've been successful at doing that.
And that's the most important right there. You know, the things that were very important on product line was the fact that you had the complete formulas. The other one was, of course, I love a company that can just mass produce different kinds of treats. Keep the formula the same, but change the actual protein. And that's important because a lot of people want to mix those. Another thing that I was going to go into, and it's a two-part question, is your raw meaty bones. Now, two questions. One question is, what are the benefits of feeding raw bone? And can you give, say somebody just adopts a puppy, can you give a puppy a raw bone?
Great question. So I have to tell you that for years, that was the only raw product that I didn't do. I was very uneducated about raw bones, and I was a little terrified of them because I did a lot of doggy dental work in my days at the veterinary clinics, and I was really worried about broken teeth. And I have learned the errors of my ways, and my dogs get raw bones a couple of times a week. I do think it's safe to feed your puppy raw bones. I think you have to be very careful about how to choose raw bones. We have some really great videos on YouTube, and I think we just redid our website, so I'm sorry that I don't know exactly where they are on our website. It changed a bit, but we have these really great videos on how to feed your dogs raw bones, how to pick the right size for your pet, and how to get them used to it so that they're not eating the wrong part of it or trying to swallow it whole. We have two different types of raw bones that we sell. One is a recreational bone, and the other is a raw meaty bone. So raw meaty bones are meant for a meal replacer. So the chicken necks are a really popular one for our cat customers. My cat, who lives with my mom, is obsessed with chicken necks. It is adorable. She will take your hand off for one, and they replace a meal for her. She eats the entire thing. The chicken neck is a non-weight-bearing bone, meaning it's more cartilaginous, so it has less calcium, more cartilage. So because it's raw, it can be completely digested. It's the part of the animal that a cat might eat in the wild if they caught that animal. Dogs and cats don't eat the long bones of their mammalian prey, like weight-bearing bones. So like if a cow is standing, is bearing its weight on its legs, then that bone becomes really dense and full of calcium and can be more difficult for them to digest. They wouldn't eat that in the wild, right? They would leave those. Those are the ones we find, right? We see this downed carcass in like wild Africa, and the only thing left is the big leg bones, right? And that's because they can't eat those because they're too firm. And we've turned those into treats for dogs, not just Primal. When I say we, I mean we in general, collectively. We give dogs those big beef cattle bones. If you want to do that safely without breaking teeth and without giving them pieces of it to ingest that can be dangerous, you need to give them the right size, and that bone needs to be cut properly. When I say cut properly, it needs to be blunted on the edges, like to have flat edges so that they can't bite pieces off of it. And it also has to not have fractures in it. So if you cut it with like a dull blade, it can crack the bone the long way, and they can easily break off a piece. It also has to be the right size. So if you give your small Italian Greyhound a large one, they can get their jawbone stuck inside of it. So you have to be careful that it's the right size, that it's the right format, and that you're supervising your dog. The idea behind our recreational bones, so the ones that are not supposed to ingest, those marrow bones that look like a little sliced portion of a cow leg bone, they're supposed to eat the marrow out of the middle of that and chew all the sinew off the edges, so it becomes like a toothbrush for your dog's mouth, right? I tell people all the time, your dog or cat has dental disease, right? Like dental disease is prevalent in our pet populations across this country, and why is that happening? I mean, when we look at wild populations of canines and felines, they don't have bad dental disease, and they're not brushing. So what's the difference? Well, there's a few differences, right? The first and most gigantic one is carbohydrates. Carbohydrates turn into sugar in our mouths, And as people, as omnivores, we have amylase in our saliva. It's this enzyme that breaks down starches. And we can easily break down the starches in our mouth. And we can, we have thumbs, and we can brush our teeth. Your dog doesn't have salivary amylase, neither does your cat. And they can't brush, right? And if you brush, it's the worst. I'm sure many of us listening have tried it. It's not very much fun. Long-time vet tech here. Still, I'm really bad about brushing my dog's teeth, although I totally have toothbrushes and toothpaste in my cupboard for them. But they are bad at, they can't brush, right? Mm-hmm. So if we're putting that 40% carbohydrate kibble meal in their mouth that's also dry, we're leaving behind all those starches that can feed the bad bacteria and build up plaque tartar, gingivitis, gum disease, periodontal disease. The most common dental treats, dental chews that are meant to be consumed in this country, I'm sure you can name a couple of brands, one big one in particular, that's made out of starch, right? Whether it's wheat starch, potato starch, whatever, those are starch-based chews. I say to people all the time, that's like brushing your teeth with an Oreo, right? So you're scraping at that plaque and tartar that's in the mouth, but you're leaving behind the sugar. You're leaving behind starch and carbohydrate that your dog or cat has no ability to break down. So if instead of that starch-based dental chew, you choose a meat-based chew, like perhaps a Primal raw bone, that not only are they going to scrape with that meat on the side of their teeth, but they're also going to eat all that rich marrow that has all those nice fats and enzymes and moisture. It's going to keep it, it's weird to think that it's going to clean their mouth to eat raw meat. Like when you think about that, you're like, ew, that's kind of gross, right? But I'm telling you, my dog's breath is fantastic after they eat their bones. It also helps with predigestion, right? Because they swallow a lot of their own saliva, and they get all that really nice rich marrow that's rich in all kinds of healthy fats. You can give them to puppies. You just have to make sure that they're supervised. I prefer with puppies who still have their baby teeth to give raw meaty bones instead of recreational bones, only because it is really easy for them to break those baby teeth, and it's no fun when they do because it hurts them, and it can be challenging for their big teeth to grow in. So you can do it. I've done it personally with my own pets and foster pets, but you just have to be really careful that you're supervising them. I let my dogs chew all the sinew off the outside of the bones and lick the marrow out, and as soon as I hear them crunching on the actual bone itself, I call them off, take it away, and throw it out, and then it's time for a new one the next day. I never restuff them or do anything like that. I just let them chew on the part they're supposed to eat, and then get rid of the actual bone itself. I hope that's helpful. You can replace up to 30% of your dog's meals with raw meaty bones without ruining the complete and balanced portion, no matter what their complete and balanced diet is, whether it's home prepared, kibble, commercial raw, whatever. If only 30% of it is made up of those raw meaty bones, you won't impact their vitamin and mineral requirements, as long as whatever else they're getting is complete and balanced.
I think you said it all right there. Well, the last question I have, it's funny. Our conversation went in so many different directions, and I love that. I love that. It's great. And
good,
I felt like I over-prepared, and you covered things, and I was like, oh, wow, okay, I don't have to cover this one because you did it. You're absolutely great. And the last thing I have to ask, where can someone actually find Primal?
So we sell Primal pet foods in independent retailers. So you won't find us in like big box stores like Petco PetSmart or like large grocery or like retailers like Walmart and Target. You can't find us there. But any independent pet food store, even if they don't carry it, can usually order it for you. We have distribution all over the country. So I don't think there's any area that we don't have a distribution truck going to. So if you can find your little local independent store, if they don't have Primal on the shelf, which they very well may, then you can have them order it for you. You can go to our locator on our website, and most of our retail locations are on there. It's kind of an auto-populated thing, so sometimes if they're not ordering super regularly, they won't pop up. So I really just recommend doing a Google search and finding a local independent pet store and asking them if they carry Primal, and if they don't, could they? It's usually pretty easy for them to get it. And local independent pet stores are always the way to go. Please support your local businesses. It's important that they stay around. The only way that people like you, Chris, can feed foods like Primal is if our little independent pet stores stay alive. I know you told me before we started that you're in an area where you don't have a lot of access to those larger stores. So I think little independent pet stores are really important and have built our brand. Our independent retailers are really important to us at Primal, and we want to make sure that they're in it for the long haul. I think they're the best ones to educate our local pet consumers about any kind of pet product, but especially pet food. So we have lots of groomers that carry our products too.
Well, this grooming salon, I'm hoping we're going to start carrying some product. I'm hoping either end of this year or early next year we will start carrying product. So stay tuned on that one. That's just the...
Well, great. That's perfect. You let me know. I'll get you in touch with our territory manager out there. She's wonderful. You'll adore her.
I have been working on Sarah. Let's carry different things. I want unique things that we cannot buy here locally or even around. I mean, big cities are 100 miles each direction. I mean, figure that out. Like I told you, we have our first Starbucks.
Well, that's the thing. Yeah, that's the thing with raw food. I can't remember if you and I were talking about this before we started the podcast or not, but with, making sure it's safely distributed to you is a really important part to what we do at Primal. We want to make sure that because it's a raw, frozen, pathogen-free food, that it gets to your store and then to your home safely. And that's a really important part of what we do. So we have networks all over the country that are able to truck and ship our products to retail locations safely, and that's why we won't ship direct, because we send it frozen and it comes from California, and we want to make sure that it's of high quality. So we use our distribution network to get it to independent pet retailers that can get it to you safely and in good quality. So
you've got to be back on the podcast. You have to come back. That's all I'm going to say.
Okay, deal. We'll have to figure out a fun, new topic to do. We'll do a little update. That sounds great.
In this industry, there's always something new and fun to talk about.
There's always a hot topic. That's so true.
Well, thank you for being on. I really appreciate it.
Oh, thank you so much. Have a wonderful night.
Thank you very much, Lindsay, for being on the podcast. It's been an absolute pleasure being able to speak with you, have this great conversation, and to really topic all throughout the nutrition from the perspective of being a vet tech, your time at Primal, and really be able to just hone in on it. It was absolutely amazing. This conversation could have gone on forever. I mean, I took so much time away from her and her child, and I'm so sorry. I really did not want this conversation to end. It is, again, really enjoyable for me to be able to just go back and forth with somebody, and especially who soapboxes like I do. It was helpful. If anybody wants to know more on Primal, go to primal.com. Check out the description page. I'll have a bunch more information. We've had videos on YouTube that we'll post up there, and I want to have this conversation again with all of you, the listeners, and I'd like to hear from you guys. Opinions, concerns, whatever the case is, reach out to us. That's what this is about. Podcast is about being able to start a conversation and pick it up with all of you. Be able to talk to you guys about this and continue it. It doesn't stop when I turn off the mic. This is the beginning, and I want to hear more from you guys. Well, I'm Chris Green. Have a pet-tastic week. Bye-bye, everybody.
Okay, gotta go in my bedtime.